the sacrifice, the night everything changed. The envelope was cream-colored and expensive, the kind Ethan used for important business documents. I found it tucked beneath a stack of golf magazines in his home office, and something about the way it was hidden made my fingers tremble as I pulled it free. Inside were papers, legal documents with my name printed across the top in bold letters. Transfer of assets, divorce settlement draft, beneficiary changes. My heart didn't break in that moment. It simply stopped, suspended in the terrible space between ignorance and knowledge. I was standing in the home office of my husband of 4 years, in the mansion I had helped purchase, holding evidence that he was planning to leave me. But it wasn't just the divorce that made my blood run cold. It was the dates on these documents. They were dated 3 weeks ago, right after I had signed over the final shares of my father's company to save his family business. I had given him everything, and he had been planning my exit the entire time. Where it all began. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the night I met Ethan Crawford at the Sterling Foundation Charity Gala. It was 4.5 years ago, and I was 27 years old, newly appointed CEO of Sterling Industries, the tech company my father had built from nothing. He had passed away 6 months earlier from a sudden heart attack, leaving me his empire and his dreams. I was drowning in grief and responsibility, trying to fill shoes that felt impossibly large. The gala was my first major public appearance as CEO, and I was terrified. I wore a midnight blue gown that my mother had helped me choose, my father's watch hidden beneath my sleeve like a talisman. That's when Ethan appeared beside me at the bar, all confident smiles and warm hazel eyes. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with dark hair styled perfectly and a presence that commanded attention. He worked in commercial real estate, he told me, specializing in luxury developments. His family had been in the business for 3 generations. "You look like you need rescuing," he said, handing me a glass of champagne I hadn't ordered. I should have seen it then. The presumption. The way he decided what I needed before asking. But I was lonely and overwhelmed, and his attention felt like sunlight after months of darkness. "I'm Maya Sterling," I said, extending my hand. His eyes widened with recognition and something else, something I would later recognize as calculation. "The Maya Sterling. I've been reading about you. Youngest female CEO in the tech sector. Your father would be proud." Those words, so simple, so kind, broke something open in me. We talked for hours that night, about business and loss and dreams. He told me about his family's company, Crawford Developments, and how hard it was to live up to legacy. He made me laugh for the first time in months. When he asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. The whirlwind romance. The courtship was intense and intoxicating. Ethan pursued me with a focus that felt like devotion. Flowers arrived at my office daily. He surprised me with weekend trips to Napa Valley and the San Juan Islands. He listened when I talked about my father, held me when I cried, and told me I was the strongest woman he'd ever met. 6 months later, he proposed on the beach at sunset, with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. It was a cushion-cut diamond set in platinum, beautiful and traditional. When I said yes, he lifted me off my feet and spun me around, laughing with what seemed like pure joy. We were married 4 months later in a ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. My mother cried through the whole thing. Ethan's mother, Victoria, an elegant woman with steel-gray hair and colder eyes, smiled tightly and welcomed me to the family. His father had passed away years earlier, leaving Victoria as the matriarch and Ethan as the only son. For the first year, marriage felt like a partnership. We supported each other's careers. I helped him network with my business contacts. He accompanied me to board meetings and investor dinners. We bought the mansion in Bellevue, a sprawling estate with mountain views. Life was good. I thought I had found my person. The first cracks. The change was subtle at first. Small things I told myself were normal. Ethan started working later hours. When I asked about his day, his answers became vague. He stopped asking about mine. The flowers stopped coming. The weekend trips disappeared. "I'm under pressure," he'd say when I mentioned it. "The company is going through a rough patch." I believed him because I wanted to, because questioning it meant questioning everything. Then came the family dinners at Victoria's penthouse. They became more frequent and more tense. Victoria would ask pointed questions about Sterling Industries, about our profit margins and upcoming deals. Ethan would shoot her warning looks, but the questions continued. "You've done so well with your father's company," she'd say, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Such a burden for someone so young. Don't you ever think about simplifying your life?" I'd smile politely and change the subject, but her words lingered like smoke. The crisis. Everything came to a head 18 months into our marriage. Ethan came home one evening, his face gray with stress. He poured himself a drink with shaking hands and sat across from me in our living room. "We need to talk," he said, and my stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "The company is in trouble. Serious trouble." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of distress I'd never seen from him. "We took on too much debt for the Lakewood project. The investors are pulling out. We're facing bankruptcy if we don't find capital fast." I moved to sit beside him, taking his hand. "How much do you need?" "Maya, it's too much. I can't ask you to." "How much, Ethan?" He looked at me then, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Hope? Relief? Something else I couldn't name. $50 million. Maybe more. The number hung in the air between us. It was an impossible amount. Except it wasn't. Sterling Industries was valued at nearly $200 million. I had the means to save his family legacy. "Let me help," I said. "We're family now. Your problems are my problems." He pulled me into his arms, his face buried in my neck. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. He was right, but not in the way he meant. The sacrifice I made. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of financial negotiations and legal paperwork. My CFO, Robert, was against the idea from the start. "Maya, this is your father's legacy," he argued in my office, his voice tight with frustration. "You're talking about selling controlling interest to generate that kind of liquid capital. Once it's gone, you can't get it back." "Ethan's family is my family now," I insisted. "And it's not selling, it's investment. We'll structure it so I maintain advisory power." Robert looked at me with something like pity. "I hope you know what you're doing." I thought I did. I thought I was being a good wife, a loyal partner. I thought I was building our future together. Victoria was surprisingly warm during this period. She invited me to lunches, called me her daughter, told me how grateful the family was. Ethan was attentive again, affectionate, making love to me with an intensity that felt like gratitude. "You saved us," he'd whisper in the darkness. "I'll never forget this." He didn't, but not in the way I imagined. The deal closed on a rainy Tuesday in March. I signed away the controlling shares of Sterling Industries to a private equity firm for $65 million. After taxes and fees, I transferred $55 million into Crawford Developments. The company stabilized immediately. The Lakewood project was saved. Ethan's family legacy was secure. At the celebration dinner, Victoria raised her glass to me. "To Maya," she said, "for her remarkable generosity and love for this family." Everyone drank. Everyone smiled. I felt proud and needed and loved. I was a fool. The warning signs. The coldness started almost immediately after. It was like Ethan had been playing a role and suddenly forgot his lines. He stopped touching me casually, those small gestures of affection that mark a marriage. When I'd reach for his hand at dinner, he'd pull away to check his phone. When I'd kiss him goodnight, he'd turn his head so I caught his cheek instead of his lips. "Are we okay?" I asked one night in bed. "We're fine," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "I'm just stressed. The company needs constant attention right now." But it wasn't just stress. He started making excuses not to come home. Business dinners, late meetings, client emergencies. When he was home, he'd lock himself in his office. The mansion, which had once felt like our sanctuary, became a beautiful prison where I lived alone. I started noticing other things too. Phone calls he'd take in another room. Text messages that made him smile in ways he no longer smiled at me. A new cologne more expensive than his usual. Unexplained charges on our credit card to restaurants I'd never been to. "You're being paranoid," he said when I asked about the restaurant charges. "Those are business lunches. You know how it is." I did know. I knew exactly how it felt to be gaslit and dismissed. But I pushed the feelings down, telling myself I was imagining things, that the sacrifice had been worth it. The discovery that changed everything. The truth came in fragments, like pieces of a shattered mirror. First, there was Claire Bennett, Ethan's new assistant. She was 27, beautiful in that polished, ambitious way. She joined Crawford Developments 3 months after my investment. When Ethan introduced us at a company event, she barely acknowledged me, her focus entirely on him. "Claire is brilliant," Ethan gushed in the car afterward. "She's got a mind for strategy like I've never seen." Something in his voice made my skin prickle. It was admiration, yes, but it was more than that. It was intimacy. I started paying attention, really paying attention. I noticed how he mentioned her constantly. Claire suggested we approach the investors this way. Claire found a solution to the zoning issue. Claire is working late with me tonight. Claire, Claire, Claire. Then came the night I dropped by his office unannounced with dinner. His secretary had left for the day. The office was dim except for the light spilling from his door. I heard voices, low and intimate. I heard laughter. I stood in that hallway with a bag of his favorite Thai food going cold in my hands, and I listened to my husband flirt with another woman through a half-open door. "You're terrible," Claire's voice warm and teasing. "You love it," Ethan replied, his tone playful in a way he never was with me anymore. I didn't go in. Couldn't. I walked back to my car, threw the food in a trash can, and drove home in numb silence. The proof I needed. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'd become desperate. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Sarah Chen who had helped my father with corporate espionage cases years ago. I told myself I just needed to know that I was probably wrong, that there was an innocent explanation. The photos came a week later. Ethan and Claire having lunch, sitting too close. Ethan and Claire leaving his office late at night, his hand on her back. Ethan and Claire entering a hotel in downtown Seattle at 2 in the afternoon. The report was clinical and thorough. They'd been involved for at least 4 months. They were careful but not careful enough. The affair wasn't just physical. They were planning together, dreaming together, building a future that didn't include me. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my own building, looking at photographs of my husband with another woman, and something inside me turned to ice. Not rage, not yet. Something colder and more dangerous. Clarity. I had given up my father's company to save his. I had handed him my security, my legacy, my future, and he had been planning to discard me all along. The overheard conversation. The final piece came 3 days later. I came home early from a meeting that had been canceled. Ethan's car was in the driveway alongside Victoria's. I heard voices from his office as I climbed the stairs. His and his mother's, tense and urgent. I don't know what made me stop and listen instead of announcing myself. Instinct, maybe, or the last shred of hope dying inside me. "When are you going to tell her?" Victoria's voice, sharp and impatient. "Soon. I just need to make sure everything's in place first." Ethan sounded tired. "You've had the papers drawn up for 3 weeks. The business is stable. We have what we need from her. There's no reason to wait." My hand found the wall to steady myself. "I know, Mother, but if I move too fast, she might fight the settlement. Her lawyer could tie things up for months. I need her compliant. Then be smart about it. Romance her a little. Make her think you still care. Then when you ask for the divorce, she'll be so shocked she'll sign whatever you put in front of her." A long pause. Then Ethan laughed, bitter and cold. "You're ruthless."
I'm practical.
She served her purpose. She saved the company. Now it's time for you to move on to someone who actually fits into this family. Claire is from our world. She understands business. She's not some sentimental child clinging to her dead father's shadow. The cruelty of those words burned like acid. But it was Ethan's response that destroyed me. "You're right. As usual. I'll handle it this weekend. I'll take her to that restaurant she loves, soften her up, then lay it out. I'll tell her we grew apart, that we want different things. Keep it clean. And the assets? Already protected. The prenup is airtight. She gets a small settlement, nothing more. The house stays with me. The business stays with me. She'll walk away with barely more than she came with." "Less than she came with," Victoria corrected. "She sold her father's company. That money is gone. She has nothing now." They laughed together. Mother and son, bonded by betrayal. I backed away from the door on silent feet, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. I made it to our bedroom, closed the door, and slid down against it to the floor. The grief came then, not gentle but violent. I pressed my fist against my mouth to keep the sobs silent. I had loved him. I had trusted him. I had given him everything. And he had been counting on my destruction from the start. But as I sat there on the floor of my bedroom, surrounded by the ruins of my marriage and my dreams, something shifted. The grief hardened into something else. Something sharp and purposeful. They thought I was broken. They thought I was beaten. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I pulled myself up, walked to the mirror, and looked at my reflection. My eyes were red, my face blotchy with tears. But behind the pain, I saw something I hadn't seen in months. I saw myself, Maya Sterling, my father's daughter. I wiped my face, straightened my spine, and made a decision. If they wanted war, I would give them war. But I would do it smart. I would do it quiet. And by the time they realized what was happening, it would be too late. I walked to my closet and pulled out the small safe hidden behind my shoe rack. Inside was the flash drive Sarah had given me with all the evidence of the affair. Beside it, I placed the divorce papers I'd found in Ethan's office. Then I sat down at my laptop and began to type. Not a letter, not a plea, plan. The battle had begun. And this time I wasn't going to be the sacrifice. I was going to be the victor, the awakening, the woman in the mirror. The morning after I discovered their plan, I woke up different. Not broken, but remade. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror as I brushed my teeth, and I barely recognized the woman staring back. For months, I had been dimming myself, making myself smaller, quieter, more convenient, trying to be the wife Ethan wanted instead of the woman I actually was. That woman was gone now. In her place stood someone harder, sharper, more dangerous. Ethan was still asleep when I dressed for work. I chose a power suit, deep burgundy with sharp shoulders. My father's watch, heels that clicked with authority. When I looked in the mirror again, I saw the CEO I used to be before I let love make me weak. "You're up early?" Ethan mumbled when I came back to grab my briefcase. "Important meeting," I said, my voice smooth and unbothered. I even managed to smile. He barely looked at me, already reaching for his phone. "Don't forget we have dinner at my mother's tonight." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, and I meant it. Every family dinner, every interaction, every moment was now an opportunity to gather information and prepare for war. I kissed his cheek like nothing had changed. His surprise was almost comical. I was already learning to be an actress in my own life. The call that changed everything. I made 3 calls from my car before I even left the driveway. The first was to Sarah Chen, my private investigator. "I need everything," I told her. "Financial records, communications, meeting schedules. Everything you can legally obtain about Crawford developments and Ethan's personal accounts. I don't care what it costs." "Maya, are you sure about this?" Her voice was cautious but not judgmental. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The second call was to Robert, my former CFO at Sterling Industries. He'd been furious when I sold the company, but he'd stayed in touch, checking on me like a worried uncle. "Robert, I need your help. Name it. I need to know if there's any way to reverse what I did. Any loopholes, any legal pathways to reclaim what was mine." There was a long pause. Maya, what happened? Everything. And nothing good. Can you help me or not? Let me make some calls. Give me 48 hours. The third call was the hardest. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Marcus Reed. Marcus had been my father's business partner and best friend before they'd had a falling out years ago. I never knew the details. My father refused to talk about it, and Marcus had disappeared from our lives entirely. But I remembered him as kind, brilliant, and fiercely protective of people he cared about. After my father died, Marcus had sent flowers and a note. If you ever need anything at all, call me. I'd never taken him up on it. Pride, maybe, or loyalty to my father's grudge. Now, pride was a luxury I couldn't afford. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. Marcus Reed. Mr. Reed, this is Maya Sterling. James Sterling's daughter. Silence. Then quietly, Maya, I wondered if I'd ever hear from you. I need help, and I think you're the only person who can give it. Tell me when and where. The meeting at the coffee shop. We met at a small coffee shop in Pioneer Square, far from anywhere Ethan or his family might see us. Marcus looked older than I remembered. He'd be 58 now, but age had only refined him. Silver hair, sharp blue eyes, and a presence that commanded respect without demanding it. He stood when I arrived, pulling out my chair like we were meeting for something pleasant instead of plotting the destruction of my husband's life. You look like your father, he said as we sat down. Same determination in your eyes. I need that determination now more than ever. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. What do you know about Crawford Developments? His expression darkened. Why? Because I married into the family. And I made a terrible mistake. I told him everything. The investment, the affair, the overheard conversation. The divorce papers hidden in Ethan's office. By the time I finished, Marcus's jaw was tight with barely controlled anger. Those bastards, he said quietly. They played you from the beginning. I know. Now I need to play them back. But smarter. Marcus leaned back, studying me. Your father and I fell out because I warned him about Victoria Crawford. Years ago, she tried to acquire one of our properties through deception. James went to war with her. Won, but it cost him. He made me promise to never do business with that family again. I honored that promise while he lived. He paused, a slight smile crossing his face. But your father's gone, and you're his daughter. And if you want to take these people down, I'm all in. Relief flooded through me. What do I need to do? First, we need to understand exactly what your legal position is. Then we need to understand theirs. Finally, we need to build a trap so perfect they'll walk right into it without even knowing. How long will this take? Months, maybe. You'll have to be patient. You'll have to keep playing the loving wife while we build your case. Can you do that? I thought about Ethan touching Claire. Victoria laughing about my destroyed legacy. The divorce papers with their calculated cruelty. I can do whatever it takes. Playing the part. The next 2 months were the most difficult of my life. Every morning, I woke up next to a man I despised and pretended nothing had changed. I smiled at family dinners. I attended company events on Ethan's arm. I played the role of devoted wife while secretly building the case that would destroy him. Sarah provided a steady stream of evidence. Photographs of Ethan and Claire at restaurants, hotels, weekend getaways they thought were secret. Text messages recovered through legal channels that were explicit and damning. Financial records showing Ethan had opened a separate account, one I wasn't named on, where he was funneling money in preparation for the divorce. But the most damaging information came from an unexpected source. A young accountant at Crawford Developments named Jenny who'd been quietly documenting irregularities for months. She contacted me through Sarah, nervous but determined. Mrs. Crawford, I think you should know that the company's financial situation isn't what Mr. Crawford tells you. There are accounts that don't add up. Money moving in ways that don't make sense. Show me. What she showed me was fraud. Systematic, deliberate fraud. Ethan and Victoria had been inflating property values, falsifying investor returns, and misrepresenting the company's actual profitability. The 55 million I'd invested hadn't saved a failing company. It had funded their scheme and lined their pockets. Why are you telling me this? I asked Jenny. She looked down at her hands. Because I have a mother. And if someone did to her what they're doing to you, I'd want someone to speak up. I hired her on the spot as a consultant, quadrupled her salary, and gave her a secure way to transfer information without anyone at Crawford Developments knowing. The growing connection. Through all of this, Marcus became my anchor. We met regularly, always in different locations, always careful. What started as strategy sessions became something more. He listened when I needed to vent. Made me laugh when the weight of the deception became too heavy. Reminded me that I was strong when I felt weak. "You're doing the right thing," he said one evening as we reviewed documents in his downtown office. It was late, past 10, and the city lights sparkled below us. "Then why does it feel so exhausting?" "Because you're a good person doing hard things. That's always exhausting." He poured us both coffee from the pot his assistant had left. "But you know what I see when I look at you?" I met his eyes. "What?" "I see James Sterling's daughter. I see the woman who built a tech company into a powerhouse after her father died. I see someone who's been knocked down but refuses to stay down. That's strength, Maya. Real strength." Something shifted in that moment. The air felt different, charged. Marcus must have felt it too because he looked away first, clearing his throat. "We should focus on the timeline," he said, professional again. But his hand brushed mine as he reached for a folder, and neither of us pulled away immediately. I was falling for him, slowly, carefully, terrifyingly, but I couldn't let myself feel it fully. Not yet. Not while I was still technically married to Ethan. Not while the battle was still being fought. The discovery of the prenup loophole. Robert called me on a Tuesday afternoon with news that changed everything. "Maya, I found something. Your prenup with Ethan has a clause you might have forgotten about." "What clause?" "If either party is found to have committed fraud or financial deception during the marriage, the prenup is voided entirely. The divorce becomes a standard dissolution of assets. 50-50 split of everything acquired during the marriage." My heart raced. Everything. Everything. Including his family business. "If you can prove he defrauded you, which, based on what you've told me, you absolutely can, you'd be entitled to half of Crawford Developments." I sat down hard in my car. "Robert, are you sure?" I had 3 different attorneys review it. They all agree. "Maya, if you play this right, you don't just walk away clean. You walk away with half of what they tried to steal from you." But Marcus, when I told him, saw an even bigger opportunity. "Don't take half," he said, his eyes gleaming. "Take it all." "How?" "The fraud Jenny documented isn't just grounds to void your prenup. It's grounds for criminal charges. If Crawford Developments is shown to be built on fraudulent practices, the company could be dissolved entirely. Assets seized. And you, as the primary investor and a victim of that fraud, would have first claim on those assets. You want me to destroy the company. I want you to reclaim what's yours. Your father's company is gone. But you could build something new from the ashes of theirs. Justice, Maya. Real justice." I thought about my father. About the company he'd built with his hands and his vision. About the legacy I'd sold to save a man who'd been planning to discard me like trash. Let's do it. The setup. With Jenny's documents, Sarah's evidence, and Marcus's business strategy, we built our trap over the next 6 weeks. Every piece had to be perfect. Every detail had to be airtight. Marcus helped me create a shell company, one that appeared to be interested in partnering with Crawford Developments on a major new project. We leaked word of this mysterious investor through the right channels. Within days, Ethan was chasing the opportunity. "There's a company interested in co-developing the Riverside property," he told me at dinner one night, barely able to contain his excitement. "If we land this, it would be the biggest deal in company history." "That's wonderful," I said, smiling. "You've worked so hard for this." He actually took my hand across the table. The first time he'd voluntarily touched me in weeks. "We've worked hard. This is for us, Maya. For our future." I wanted to throw my wine in his face. Instead, I squeezed his hand and said, I'm so proud of you. The meeting was set for 3 weeks later. A formal presentation to the investors at Marcus's office building. Ethan spent those weeks preparing, pulling together projections and property assessments, completely unaware that every document he prepared was another nail in his coffin. Victoria insisted on being involved. "This is a family company," she said. "I should be there for major presentations." Perfect. I wanted her there. I wanted them both to see it coming. The night before the meeting, Ethan suggested we go out to dinner. "To celebrate," he said, "before everything changes." He took me to the restaurant where he'd proposed, a romantic Italian place overlooking the water. He ordered wine, expensive wine, and raised his glass. "To us," he said, "and to new beginnings." I clinked my glass against his, my smile never wavering. "To truth," I said, "and getting what we deserve." He didn't catch the double meaning. He was too pleased with himself, too confident that his plan was working. "Maya," he said, setting down his glass and taking my hand. "I know things have been difficult between us lately. I've been distant, focused on work. But this deal is going to change everything. Once it goes through, I'm going to have more time for us. For our marriage." It was such a perfect, terrible lie. I almost admired the performance. "I'm glad," I said softly, "because I've been thinking about us too, about what we built together, about what we're going to build next." His smile widened. He thought he had me, thought I was the compliant, trusting wife he could manipulate with a romantic dinner and empty promises. "There's actually something I want to talk to you about," he began, and I knew this was it. This was the moment he'd planned to ask for the divorce, to soften me up before the killing blow. But I couldn't let him have that satisfaction. "Before you say anything," I interrupted, "I need to tell you something. I love you, Ethan. I've always loved you. And whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the future brings, I want you to know that I've always done everything for us. For this family." He looked confused, thrown off his script. Thank you. I love you too." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, but I smiled through it. When he dropped me off at home, he claimed he had late work to prepare for tomorrow. I watched his car disappear down the driveway. Then I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Marcus. "Everything is ready. See you tomorrow." His response came immediately. "Justice is coming. Sleep well." I went upstairs, packed a small bag with my essentials and my father's watch, and set it by the door. Tomorrow I would walk out of this house for the last time. Tomorrow the trap would spring shut. Tomorrow Ethan Crawford would learn what it felt like to lose everything. I sat on the edge of my bed in the darkness, my heart pounding with anticipation and fear and something that felt almost like joy. I had spent months being silent, being small, being the victim. Tomorrow I would be the storm, the morning of reckoning. I dressed with care. A black suit, perfectly tailored. My father's watch. My mother's pearl earrings. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a warrior in business casual. Ethan was already gone when I came downstairs. He'd left early to prepare for the presentation, leaving me a note. "See you there. This is going to be amazing." I left the note on the counter and walked out the door for the last time. Marcus was waiting in his car down the street. When I slid into the passenger seat, he looked at me with concern and pride. "Are you ready for this?" I thought about my father, about the company I'd lost, about the months of betrayal and lies, about the woman I used to be and the woman I'd become. "I was born ready," I said. He smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Then let's go make history." As we drove toward downtown, toward the office where everything would come to light, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. I felt free. The trap was set. The players were in position. And in less than 2 hours, Ethan Crawford's world was going to burn to the ground. I was going to watch it happen with a smile on my face. The reckoning. The conference room. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Reed building was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Seattle skyline. A massive mahogany table dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars. Everything about the space screamed power and money.